a working title. Then we have actions. We'll have to double check on that, I think. Yeah, that's something you brought up, Alex, right? Like triggering netconf RPCs. That's, I think, something for discussion. And the logging framework, another thing that mainly you brought up, Alex. My suggestion would be that we kick off with the config diff tool. I'd like to present that to you guys, show you what that is, how it works, and then yeah, get some feedback. And then yeah, hopefully we can get them to give us an update on the other stuff, and then have the other ones, the other topics come afterwards. Is that all right with anyone, or any additional things we need to add to the agenda that you think has higher priority or whatever? All good, huh? Great. So the config diff tool, what does it do? We have built the whole tooling around Yang schema, loading configurations in XML or JSON or YAML into that tree, and then using schema, the schema information to process the whole thing and use that to build the tree and so on, right? So we figured we have a lot more potential with this tool, so we can just provide that to people to low configurations, do even run diffs between configurations, and get a more insight into their configurations, but also run validations to see offline, off box, if a configuration fits the constraints that the Yang schema puts into all the fields and so on. And then further, we also want to leverage this tool as an offline vehicle within the Choreo ecosystem, where we build these configurations, these SDC config CRs, and so on, and via that have the ability to check like, first of all, build an overall config from all the various snippets that might fall out of Choreo, but also then validate and inspect the diffs and so on. So what we have is, I said, for now it's called config diff. We've started with the concept of a workspace, because it's not built like a client server application, but it's just an application. It's just a binary that you kick off once, and then it does the stuff. It loads a single or multiple configurations into the tree, and then it stops, right? And then you tell it to do the validation and so on. So we need to persist all the data that's loaded into the tree onto disk for the next. Yes, if you have name suggestions, paste them. So we need to persist these between calls. You will see that in a bit, right? But As you see here, and the first thing I did was workspace list, and you see I have two workspaces, default and other. And in those, I've loaded specific schemas. In both cases here, it's SRL 24.72. I've loaded those, and then I've added, in this case, three intents, three configurations into that workspace, and now I can work with that. So let's see how to create such a workspace. It's right now it's quite implicit thing. So I'm loading a schema because the schema is the first thing that I need to build the whole configuration tree. I need to know like what elements I am able to insert into the tree and so on, right? So let's create a workspace called meeting and load an SRL, the SRL schema. The file, the schema definition is exactly what you know from SDC, right? So you can go to the SDC, docs page. SDC docs page under, where is it? User guide, schema. We'll have the different examples here, right? SRL, SRS, and Juniper, Arista, whatever. Pick the one you need, maybe adjust the versions and the version references in the folder structure and so on. And then you can take that one and load it in this config div. What it does, it leverages the config server code. It'll download the referenced Git repositories, and then do all these copy operations that are defined in here, right? So this, we have the EOS 431.1f, and we copy that over to the main schema directory for that schema that's defined here, right? And there might be additional ones, but also the other repos it'll download, do the copy operation, and then have the schema available locally, and then compile it into the Badger DB that we're using to store the pre-processed schemas in the format that we needed for the tree, and keep it there. That's why loading here now is so quick. But yeah, in general, it'll go download the Git repos and prepare the whole thing. So it might take a little longer, depending on the size of the schema. So what it did now, it's created a workspace called meeting, and it's attached or wired the schema definition to it, right? If you want to inspect that, yeah, here's the path that it gives, right? So the only content of that directory is the schema.json, and that's only given the reference to the schema, as you see here as well, right? If we move a little further up, there is all the other directories that we needed to create, right? First, the downloads, that's where the Git repos are being downloaded. The schemas, that's where it's being copied over, like the copy operations. And then schema store is the compiled BadgerDB with the compiled schemas in BadgerDB format. And then we have the workspaces. Yes, so that's it. Now what we can do is we can load a configuration. Config load. So one thing we can do is load an SDC based configuration, right? So that's our CRD as we know it from SDC with all the paths and configuration, definition of which device and blah blah blah. You should know that, right? And we just give it a file format as SDC, and we load that. Let's do it like this: config diff. Oh, I'm in the right. So it said successfully loaded this configuration. It's taking the priority and the file format and the name basically from the file. It's implicitly changing that format to JSON, but you see the priority is taken from the input. We now do a list workspaces again. We see we forgot to add the workspace. That's something I would like to have some feedback for from you guys. Should we make this so implicit if no workspace definition is given here? It's all going to default, right? So the question is, does that make sense, or should we make the workspace flag a mandatory one, so that I've seen this a couple of times now where I was like, okay, I want to add this to the meeting one, and then obviously it did forget that one, and it ended up in the default. So yeah, that would be nice to have some feedback if we should make it mandatory or not. Now that we've defined it in the meeting workspace, that one is being loaded and sitting in there. Now what we can do is change to the config sub command, right? And we can do a config show, and it'll give us all the configuration that we've loaded, which is again meeting, which is this. If we go to one that has a running configuration and some additional configuration loaded, the running is taken as the baseline, and the config show command is just giving us the changes to that baseline, right? We can also add the -a command, and it'll give us the full configuration baseline plus the additions. So that'll give us that, and then we also have config blame, and config blame gives us the configuration and where the highest priority value is coming from. And you see in here, like a lot of stuff is coming from running, but then under interfaces we have test orphan. So Ethernet 1.1 is coming from that test orphan configuration that we've loaded as an SDC configuration format. And then the other stuff is coming from that foobar, config load. And of course, validate. So this will run the whole set of schema-based validations that we've implemented in data server. That means we've now checked via this command with the running and so on configuration. We've checked 17 leaf refs, 115 length statements, length checks, 5 mandatory attributes, 4 min-max range definitions, 649 must statements, 24 patterns, and 124 ranges. And the validation was successful. Anyone trying to say something? I heard him.
Yeah, do you hear me, by the way?
Yes.
I think there was there's discussion on the chat on the workspace name. I told Marcus that we were going to call it Target at some point. Is that still true?
Yes, that was the last discussion the two of us had. But then I mean I'm still open, but I postponed it for now because I think target is also not the right thing, because in the end it really refers to only a folder in the file system, because you can load configurations of the same target twice into 2 different workspaces. So I felt like calling it target would also not do it the right justice, right?
Okay. Yeah. But yeah, we are managing the configuration of a device at the end of the day, right? Of a given device.
Yeah.
Right. So that's kind of I think Alexander had a question on the same line, is because he suggests to call it a namespace, but yeah, a namespace is also, in my view, not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at the end of the day, what the workspace is, I think, is that it manages the configuration of a given device with certain files. But what Marcus said is correct. Is like you could create another one for the same device and put other files in it. But then I think it still calls a target, but you just give it another name, right? Because target is the identifier that we have today for a device. If someone wants to use it in a way that you manage different the same target with different folders, for me it's still a target. Just give it another name at the end of the day. But I mean, then the terminology remains consistent, is what I'm trying to get to. But if there is other suggestions, please. Yeah. Okay, sorry, that was my comment. So.
Yeah. And then we have config diff as well, which gives you a diff output of baseline versus the configurations that you've added. Also here, it's not implemented yet, but we have the ability to give you the whole configuration and only highlight these changes, only give you these changes. As you see here, there are certain lines in that output, or make it a side-by-side diff, as you also know it from Git or whatever tools. So yeah, these will be options that we want to add, but that are not there yet. And with that, I think talked about blame, diff. load. Yeah, so we will also have a bulk loading for the CRD based configs. Show, validate, and yeah, that's it for now. So yeah, there is a command to remove these workspaces besides the listing, and then yeah, schemas load we've seen. You can also remove a schema or list the schemas that are created. Yes, that's it. So as you've seen, it's all single commands, like adding a config, adding another config, and so on. And in between, it's persisting. What we've done is the persistent part itself basically is a wrapper around the inner library. So we've had the discussion with Alex that it would be good to have a different type of interface here as well, where you would not where you would define a couple of steps in a single file or whatever, and it would do those without the persistence. Add one or two, three, whatever configurations besides the baseline. Do a validation and return with a passed or fail, just as an additional step in the CI/CD pipeline, for instance. Yeah, but that needs to be defined and discussed, what the right shape of that interface would then be. Could also expose it via gRPC, but then yeah, we're back into data server land, I think. So that doesn't make too much sense, but yeah.
Hi, Marcus. It's Dan here. Just a quick question. Sorry, because I think maybe I missed a bit. How did you define the baseline config here? I saw that you loaded intents from the local disk, but where did the baseline come from?
That's also just a load, config load.
The idea, I think, then is to fetch it somewhere from. You have to fetch it from somewhere, right? Whether it's the real device or whether it's somewhere that you keep track of the latest running config. So it should come from somewhere. And yeah, so I think that's the idea.
Yeah, so you can fetch it from SDC, I guess, right?
Yeah, the idea is that we get it from somewhere, but the loading is like the same as a regular config, except that I think there's a special. I think do we call it running or something like that, Marcus?
Yeah. So it's a special intent name, right?
Yeah, correct.
So if you name the intent running, then that's the baseline, right? Because that's
okay.
what we use internally in the tree also as the specific marker, and we have specific priority for running. So therefore, you will see that running will be overridden. It's too high up, but we have a predefined priority. So this priority statement here will be overridden. So we can leave that aside. But yeah, basically, what I've shown was the loading the SDC config resource, the CR, right? But you can also only load a basic JSON that contains configuration. For instance, like this, right? Just a plain JSON file, and then you define file format, intent name, and then obviously the workspace again, and then this would load, in this case, running into that workspace.
Yeah.
And then you add your additional ones either with this simple JSON or the SDC format, and then you can run the diffs validation and so on.
Okay, cool. So it's completely offline. There's no integrated hook into SDC, right, to grab the config. You have to do that outside.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's clear.
We could do things like that, but right now the idea is to use it completely offline, right? And then, okay, so what hooks we need to build, we can look into that, but they would be offline, right? So out of the tool, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
The idea is to use, that's why I called it, I mean, one of my suggestions was SDCO. It's probably not so, because it's mainly the offline version of SDC, more or less, except that it doesn't interact with the real device, right? But we felt it is a useful tool to have for, let's say, CI systems, right? So this allows you to do actually everything except for transacting with the device, but you can actually try things out completely offline, validate schema, validate your pipelines before you actually go to the live system. That's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
You can also use it just as a tool to convert from JSON to XML configuration or YAML or whatever, right? So we have the config show also gives you the option to define the output format. I should extend the description here. So yeah, besides JSON, that would be YAML. Oh, YAML doesn't work. It's not YAML. It's it can be XML. YAML I should add as well, and then it's JSON or JSON IETF, I think. And you can use the tool even to convert configurations from one format into the other, which might also be helpful in other cases than we're seeing just with Choreo or whatever.
Yeah, it's a really nice feature.
Plus the other benefit, I mean, the benefit is you don't need to build a Kubernetes cluster and stuff like that. So for example, if you're testing some new config and you want to try things out, I think we see a lot of benefits in terms of operational. It's very lightweight, right? And yeah, it basically does a lot of stuff. That's was the idea, to release this as a capability for, like I said, CI or offline usage and or conversions, like Marcus was saying. Right?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Yeah. Maybe as a bit of a side question, but related. I didn't try it, but does it actually work with SDC that you can do the dry run when you apply? So you can do the server-based dry run. Does that actually work?
Yes. In SDC, in the live SDC, it should work. Yes.
Yeah,
actually, what you do with live SDC is basically this. So you kind of do what Marcus showed. You actually do the dry run. You don't get the diff. What you get is validation result. So if it fails, you get the reasons why it didn't succeed that you get.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So Marcus, when do we think we can give this to people to try and play with it? A couple of weeks.
We should agree on a name.
Yes, yeah.
As soon as we have a name, I think I can push that properly into the SDC GitHub org, and then I'm happy for everyone to just try it. I mean, we will evolve, but yeah, just for people to try and get a sense for it. We can do that straight away, I guess.
If anyone has better suggestions on namings, then the sooner the better, of course.
I mean,
so let's decide.
Like tool or simulations, I was more thinking about like SDCsim for simulation or SDC tools. So
and that's also good. Yeah.
Yes.
It's better than all, by the way, in my view. SDCsim, I like.
And the workspace stuff would also be good. Otherwise,
Yeah, we need to
so
agree.
to have a name for that, because yeah, then we can keep that and not have the file system polluted with stuff that's not used and needed anymore. Yeah, these are the two things, and I think then we can just simply push it. And,
But SDCsim seems to be a good name, Marcus, not?
okay.
Put it.
Yeah. We can call it
And
Rabbit.
Makes sense.
In my view, I don't care about the name too much.
No, but yeah, I mean, yeah. But let's decide sooner than later. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And for the workspace, I'm still of the opinion to call it target, as it closest resemble what we do on the real system.
Target. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'll do these renamings, and then I'll let you guys know in Discord when and where to find it.
Okay. I can do a quick update on the deviations, by the way.
Maybe one
sorry.
more thing that we haven't discussed is kubectl SDC IO, right? Whereby
Yes.
we maybe also have to remove the IO, but give me a sec.
Yeah. So yeah, to give you some context, we also introduced. I don't think we discussed that a lot. I mean, I posted on LinkedIn or something like that, and on the Slack, it's like we also added a config blame. So in the live SDC, so like you saw here, Marcus showed a blame, right? The blame is kind of the ID from GitHub that you can basically say which code was owned or what's contributed by which person. Here, the idea is the blame is which parameter is coming from which intent. That's kind of the idea. Now, so we have a new API or a new resource in Kubernetes called config blame. The issue is that you need to represent it. So Marcus built a tool. So it's a kubectl extension. So kubectl has this plugin framework. Yeah. So Marcus built a plugin that basically you can use and with the config blame type of feature, and then it does a nice representation in the same format as you saw in the offline or the simulation SDC. So the idea is also what name. So at the moment, the plugin calls SDCIO, I think, right, Marcus?
Yeah.
And the question is, should we also, should this plugin not just be called SDC?
Probably, yes.
I think we should call it SDC because this is not really offline, right? So I think, yeah, let's call this SDC because we might have more extensions going forward, right? That we can then bundle in there. Any other ideas or remarks?
Yeah, so the idea would be to add certain subcommands to kubectl SDC that might provide you nicer representations of the data that we anyways have sitting there in the Kubernetes API server.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
And yeah, the blame is the only thing that we've done so far. But yeah, we will do or we can do additional ones as well.
Yeah, indeed. Okay, let's do that.
Yeah, so now I've got that set up. So kubectl sdcio blame, and then you define the target. The target here, auto completion, is also common from the Kubernetes API itself. And then it's not working. So yeah, as you've seen, I had to build it and so on. I need to see what the issue is, but basically the output is the same as you've seen from config diff blame, but in that case, it's not loading that from the file system or whatever. It's going straight away to the Kubernetes API, fetches that data, and then represents it in this tree-like view, and gives you the owner of, like, the owning intent of that value. And we have that already sitting here in in a repository, Git repository, and here you see the output again when it's working. Some blaming that target SROS, and then you'll see the whole configuration tree with the intent name of where the value, the highest priority value, is coming from. That's basically that.
All right. Thanks, Marcus. So yeah, so then I'll quickly explain what I saw on the deviations. So I changed, like we discussed last week, I changed the implementation of the reconciler. So right now in the latest PR, so it's not merged yet, because next week when Hans is back, we will do extensive CI validations to see how it behaves. But basically what I did is so today the config server has a reconciler, and that reconciler is triggered based on a config CR, right? And every individual instance of a config CR is reconciling and is then doing an update to the data server and tries to reconcile the state to what the spec is saying, right? And so what it means is that if you have, let's say, 10 snippets of a configuration for the same device, you have 10 different reconciler loops that are triggered to try and accomplish that, okay? Now we see that with non-revertive deviations, and actually in general, we believe that it might have been a better approach to do the reconcile loop on a per target basis rather than on a per CR basis. So the idea is to group, so to take all the CRs of a given target and then group them together and then transact that towards the data server and try to get that implemented, okay? Also, what you have to bear in mind, what is the difference between revertive and non-revertive behavior, is that we now changed the implementation, also that a deviation is no longer a part of the config status, but is actually a separate resource. And so in other words, I can show you. Let me share my screen. If you go here. Yeah, so right now, you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So if you look at this, so put that up. QCPR get deviations. So you see that now we have deviation as a separate resource. So unmanaged configs became a deviation, and these are the ones. And so we have two types. One is target-based deviations, which is basically the representation of what we had before with unmanaged configs. So that's now a deviation on a target. And then we have deviations on a per config snippet, right? So that's the new thing right now. So what is the change in implementation is that what happens is that with the change that I did end of last week, I group all the configs and together and transact them as a whole set to the data server in order to group them and manage them as a group. What I forgot to say, I think, is that the difference between revertive and non-revertive operation is that if you are in revertive mode, which is still our default and the mode that we had before, is that if you see a deviation, what will happen is that that particular config is reapplied in order to override what the user has put onto the device, right? Whereas if you are in non-revertive mode, what happens is actually the deviation is becoming part of our configuration. So it means that we kind of inherit the deviation as a config snippet. And the way we use it is that deviation has a priority that is higher than the regular config. So in other words, we use our layering approach with priorities as a vehicle to actually ensure that when we merge the various sources, we always, so the highest priority wins. So we are using that mechanism to handle non-revertive operations on if you have a non-revertive deviation configuration. And you can control them either globally or on a per intent basis, right? So what did I change is that instead of having a config reconciliation on a per CR instance, what now happens is that there is a controller that acts on the targets. And if a deviation on a given target changes, or a config snippet on a given target changes, or a target changes by itself, right? That can also happen. What happens is that, of course, if the target goes down, all the related configs go in a failed state, right? Because they are not transacted. So that's one thing. But assume the target is up. What is happening is that there is an algorithm that I posted in the Discord, right? So what I do is we take all the configs. So we first determine if there is change to a given config snippet. If there is, we take it. If there is not, we do not take it. But what we do is that if there was a change, we also include the ones that failed before. And of course, then we also incorporate the related deviations depending whether you're in revertive or non-revertive mode. And that's the one that we are transacting to the system. And we believe that that's a better mechanism to handle this environment. So that I have implemented actually last week. So that's the update that I wanted to give. I don't know whether there's questions, but yeah, that's kind of it.
Is there some attribute or some way to see if there's a deviation to a config?
Yes, here. So because the name is one-to-one, so if you look to the related configs here, the name of this deviation is the same. So there's exactly the same name. So you see that this test is as one deviation and the other three here don't.
Yep.
So this is what we could do then with the tool. So for example, the plugin of SDC, we could build a tool that actually does that, where we can show configs with their deviations in one view, for example.
Yep. Yeah, I was thinking maybe on a per target base, is there a way to kind of bubble up that at least one of the configs is deviated? So yeah, then you can kind of
Yeah, so that's something that we probably need to add in the plugin of kubectl, because what kubectl does by default is a per resource view, right? And you can change the parameter that you represent, but grouping and stuff like that you have to do with a plugin. So that's maybe an addition that we can add with the plugin to actually give a view of Yep, I agree with you. Per target and per per config and stuff like that to actually show them back to back. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so I did some basic testing with this. I know that Leah is also trying to test some deviation with metrics and things like that. So she had some had some problems, I think, but yeah. So next week when Hans is back, we will put this to the test and we try to merge this to main as soon as possible, because this has some impact on some of the CRs that we had. So for example, in this setup, if you look to the tests, I was testing, I tested both unmanaged, but you see here that I have added revertive false. So this is a non-revertive config snippet. That's also why you see that if you look at the deviations, this deviation stays to 1, right? So it does not update, because that's so there is actually a deviation onto the real target versus the intent, so it stays like that. If I would, I don't know, I haven't tested it, but for example, if I would edit this sorry, and I change this to revertive, so I delete this, then what we should see, it's already gone. Okay, that's quick. So now if you log into the box, SSH CLab, what was it for? I think. Here. And if you do interface system, I think I was doing, it should be, yeah, it changed actually. So it's, yeah, so it works. Yeah. So, yeah. So the logic is now that the config reconciler has changed and is now acting on a per target basis. So we believe that also if you have large amount of snippets, then this will become a more stable way of managing change. And for example, if I, so one of the challenges that I thought about was always if you have multiple config snippets and they have like leaf refs and dependencies and we transact them one by one, it might be that one fails because it's dependent on the other one. And so we didn't really manage those dependencies with the config instance-based reconcile loop. Whereas with this new approach, we actually bring them together. And as a result, that dependency is resolved automatically by transacting them as a group rather than as an individual. And from a config blame point of view, what Marcus was showing with so I keep track of which parameter of the config was owned by which intent. All of that logic stays as is, so we don't change. It doesn't have an effect on it. It's just the way that we group the changes of the configuration towards the data server is grouped right now versus before they were all individual transactions. And we believe that this is a more scalable implementation that will help better stability and scale going forward.
Yeah, makes sense to me. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is not yet merged into the main build, but we, so the idea is we have to do, we want to do some extensive testing because it has some implications and before we merge, but the goal is by next week and Hans is back. So during the course of next week, with the idea is to merge that into the mainstream. So that's it from my side. What other topics do we still have left? So Leah, any questions from you or any feedback so far? I know that you have been trying it.
Yeah, no questions yet, but I'm still testing it out. So
Okay.
Maybe I'll have something more to add in the Discord channel later on.
Okay, let me know and then I'll have a look.
Yeah. But thank you for that.
All right. So we have 5 minutes left, I think. Is there any other topic?
There was the actions, netconf RPC actions, right? And the logging stuff. I think we should probably cover those in the next call. Huh?
Yeah, that's okay for me. Yeah. I don't know, Alex. They came from they're both from Alexander, I think, right?
No.
Is that okay, Alexander, or? Okay, he might be.
Yeah, we don't hear you, Alex.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we leave it like that.
Sorry, do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I was agreeing, saying, yeah, that's fine for me. Let's do it next week.
Well, if you have other topics for next week, for example, I added this document, right? So just use it, put your name in it and the topic, and then we'll try to give you airtime on the agenda or discuss the topic if needed, right? I hope that's okay as a mechanism. So I think I also put that document on the Discord. I pinned it on the SDC. Let me share my screen again. I pinned it. I don't know whether you guys, you see it. But so what I did I pinned these two messages. One is the document, this one. So this is the document. And so I'll add a note here. So for next week, right, we will add the new note, right? And then the idea is to put just put the topics. Typically what I do is I copy the things that were not covered. And maybe we can leave this. So config diff tool, I don't think we need, right? So we need those. So I will leave this because we probably need to do an update. Yeah, maybe let's do that at the end because Hans will be just back. So we probably will not have too much update unless there is some changes or fixes that we need to do for Leah or she finds some issues, right? But yeah, just add topics here and then we'll try to address them. Okay, so that was, I thought, the way to have these things covered. Of course, when we start the meeting, and if you have a topic, we can also add them at that time, right? But sometimes it's good to see them ahead of time. And I think that's all for now. But yeah, I added these things, both the meeting invite as well as the doc I pinned in the channel. So I hope you guys can see that as well. All right, if nothing else, yeah, we can take it from here. Thanks for joining, and then we'll see or talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Yes, bye.
For the rest of the day.